Well, I don't ask for much when we do these podcasts every so often, but I'm going to ask for a little bit of patience, but I promise it will be worth it today. Hey, I'm Neil Gordon with Augusta Business Daily, and we're going to talk business and personal today with my friend Keith Perret, who owns the State Farm Agency there on Washington Road in National Hills. How are you today?
I am good, Neil. It's
Wonderful.
good to see you.
Yes, sir. I asked for, we're going to actually have a full-length podcast, and I hope that you will watch this in its entirety, and we'll have some other clips as well. People like to do business with people who are real, and I've joined on with you and have our insurance policies with you because I like how authentic you are. Why has community involvement been so important to you since you and your wife moved to town?
Well, Neil, one of the things that drew us to this in the first place was being able to get deeply involved in a community. You know, the jobs we had and the careers we had in the past, we always worked remote. So even though we did a lot of volunteering in our community, we didn't get involved civically, and there was only so much we could do because I was traveling all the time. So when we came here, our goal was to make sure that we got involved locally so that we could make an impact on the people here locally, both in Augusta and North Augusta.
All right.
And so far it's been good. I mean, we do a lot of stuff with the different communities, Grovetown, Harlem, Augusta, North Augusta. And we're involved in a lot of things on the Chamber of Commerce and other things. But what I have found is that there is a huge need for people to get involved in the recovery community here in Augusta.
And that's really your passion.
It really is.
Right? Your mission.
It is. And it has been for a while. Even when we were down on the Gulf Coast, we were very involved in everything that was going on down there, whether it was involved in the AA community, whether it was speaking to vets out at the VA or anything like that. We really tried to make sure that we were giving back. And since we've been here, we've been really fortunate to get involved with a number of different things. I go to church at Victory Baptist and currently teach the recovery class over there. And we're revamping that right now. And the other group that I'm heavily involved with is called 143 Ministries.
That's right. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. 143 Ministries. Is this a fairly new program?
No, these guys have been around for about 6 years. And but they've come up with a very unique way of looking at the recovery community and recovery in general. It's called redefining recovery. And Cliff Nobles runs it, but they have two different rehab centers. One's called Catherine's Way. One is called Emmanuel House. So Catherine's Way is for the women. Emmanuel House is out on a farm for the guys. And I think they're up to 15 transition homes where, you go from the rehab center to the transition home and then, back to normal life, hopefully.
And it just struck me, the pressures of running a business as we do. And I know, of course, it's highly confidential, but do you find business owners or business leaders that are part of either of those two groups?
You do, but like if you're in like an Alcoholics Anonymous environment, it's Alcoholics Anonymous for a reason.
Sure.
If you're working more with like 143, they look at themselves as missionaries to Augusta. So they're out there trying to reach people. They have a really interesting story. If you go to their website, you can read the vision for how all this came to be in place. There's a church called The River that they have as well that meets on Friday nights, and just some really good stuff going on. I actually was at Victory one night and saw a guy named Adam come and present some of the material that they've developed. I was blown away. I mean, I've been sober for 10 years, and I've seen a lot of things. I've spoken to lots of different groups, told my story, and when I saw what they were doing, I was just completely mesmerized. Going, where has this been? Why is this not being taught all over America? And I'll give you a quick rundown on it. It's called there's a lot of different things they teach, but the primary thing they talk about is the problem response chart. Because if you think about this, you got to broaden your mind a little bit when it comes to recovery, right? Everybody needs recovery, right? It's not, there is drug and alcohol recovery, but look at the average person that's out there. And we all, and people go, well, what do you mean by that? Well, everybody needs recovery from what was lost, from what was stolen by the enemy, and what was freely surrendered due to the fall of man in the garden.
My wife likes to say, everyone has some sort of ism. It may be food, it might be drugs, or boyfriends, girlfriends, or what have you. Everyone is sharing something.
I've said this for years, that when you really look at the root cause of whether it's bitterness, whether it's anger, whether it's food addiction, whether it's porn addiction, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's sadness, whatever it is, almost every time it's people are trying to fill a God-sized hole with something else.
Yeah.
And so what the problem response chart says is this, is that we all have innate needs, right? The need to be accepted, the need to be seen in a favorable light, the need for others to see us in a favorable light, the need to emotional needs, physical needs. And these are God-given innate needs, and they're good. Okay, but here's what happens, is that a problem happens. And this problem could have been from your childhood. It could be from something that happened yesterday, but it makes you feel a certain way. I'll give you a church example. How about this? You walk into church on a Sunday, and you walk up to the pastor, and there's a couple of people talking to him, and they're in deep conversation. But you walk up, and they kind of ignore you, but they don't mean to ignore you. They're just in conversation.
Focused.
But you feel like, well, they're just ignoring me and they're not talking to me, so you walk away. And you walk away feeling a little bit like, well, I don't belong. Were they talking about me? I mean, what was that all about? So you go to another group of men. Same thing is going on. There's guys, they're talking. You walk up and nobody really acknowledges you, even though they know you're there. And you walk away from that one going, well, nobody loves me in this church. Nobody likes me. Why am I even here? And you go sit down and you isolate and you sit there and you stew on it. Right? Well, what's really happening there is some of your innate needs are not being met. You don't feel like you're part of the group. You don't feel important. You don't feel liked. And so when that happens to somebody, we call that being in the void. When you get in your negative emotions, it puts you in the void. And here's where you got to make a decision. What happens next? Do you act out with behaviors that can be, negative behaviors like isolation? Maybe I lash out. Maybe I go over here and go, do you hear what those guys over there are doing? And so you do different things to make yourself feel better. And that's where most people stop. They have behaviors that, are not the best, but they're just trying to avoid this feeling that they have. Now, if you're an addict or an alcoholic, you take that to the next level, right? And you go, I don't want to feel this. I'm going to go get drunk. Or I don't like the way I feel. I'm going to go get high because I don't want to deal with this.
Right.
And that's what happens to people, and it just spirals out of control.
My brother used to call it the path of least resistance.
It is.
Avoidance and not kind of dealing. And we're tackling things head on with Keith Perret. Keith is, for several years, has been the agency owner right here with the red car of State Farm in National Hills, not too far from a little golf tournament that happens each and every April. And you can learn more about Keith and his personal journey. It may be of help to you if you're a business leader as he is at Keith SF for State Farm, Keith SF Perret on Facebook, or kpinthehouse.com. And before we continue a little bit more with 143 Ministries, in your role at State Farm, is there ever an opportunity for discussions like this? Like, are we at a place in time where people are more open to be vulnerable?
They are. Here's what happens. If you come to my office, 9 times out of 10, we're either going to have revival or an AA meeting. And it just happens as a natural progression of our discussions. One of the things we do as agents is I have to get to know you. I got to learn about you to know what I should suggest for you, because we're not selling products, we're selling a plan and making sure people are protected. Well, that comes with personal information.
Right.
And in order for me to get people to share that, sometimes I have to share from my own life. And as soon as I do that and I start talking about, because I'm very open about my past struggles, and as soon as I do that, well, what I have found is that when you talk about alcoholism, just narrowing it down to that, everybody either is one, they know one, or they're curious about it because they've heard of one. And until you've really gone down that path and been there, you don't really know what that's like, but if you've been through that, just the horror of that disease and come out the other side, well, now you've been through a lot of different things, but you can relate to people in a way that you couldn't relate to before.
And be real and be authentic, which is what our conversation is about today. You mentioned earlier in our podcast that you've been sober for 10 years. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
That's fantastic. That's an amazing accomplishment. Walk us back a little bit. What was it like for you prior to 10 years ago?
Well, there's a long story that goes along with that. I will say this, though, about 10 years.
Yeah.
When people ask me how long I have sober, I always look at my watch and go, well, what time is it? Because I woke up about 6 o'clock this morning.
Oh, it's been 6 hours.
Yeah, so all I have is the sobriety I have today.
Right.
And I have to focus on that every day. It has to be one of the most important things in my life because I don't ever want to go back to who I was. So if you look at what happened in my life, if I can condense this story down, my childhood was fairly normal, but there were some things that happened that made me feel a certain way. For example, I was introduced to pornography very young, like sixth grade, and it gave me a very warped sense of my own self-worth, comparing myself to these stories and these things that I saw as a child that hadn't gone through puberty. And it really caused me a lot of issues around that as I grew up with women and trying to figure out how all that works. That was a big one. I really didn't, I was raised Catholic, and so alcohol wasn't a big deal around our family. And quite frankly, I didn't drink alcohol until I got to high school. And then at Catholic high school in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, I can tell you that at the time, now we're talking about 1980, not 2013, it was part of the culture. It was part of what we did. I mean, you got assigned a senior, and the very first thing that happened is they took you out and got you smashed drunk. And then as we went through high school, we would drink on, depending on what season it was, football or basketball season, drink on either Friday night or Saturday night. And then we didn't drink on Sundays because we just didn't do that. Unless we were, if we were out on the lake in the boat having a couple beers, that's one thing. But I usually was driving the truck, so I didn't drink because I had to pull the boat home. But as I got to, so I had a pretty good high school experience, never did drugs or anything like that. But when I got to college, that's when things changed. And I joined a fraternity, and it was a horrible experience for me. And a lot of that had to do with I really joined the wrong fraternity for the wrong reasons.
I was in Sigma Phi Epsilon, Sig Ep, in the early 1980s.
Oh, really?
What was your fraternity?
So it was Kappa Alpha.
Okay.
And my dad was a KA, and my older brother was a KA. Okay. I really should have gone to another fraternity, but I joined because of them.
Okay.
And the challenge there, if I'm honest about it, is my brother was 2 years older than me. So he was not kind to the guys below him when they were coming in as pledges.
A little bit of hazing, if you will.
Yeah, and because they couldn't do anything to him, they took it out on me. And I was a big kid, and so that was their opportunity to do something like that to somebody they would never normally be able to pick on.
Kind of what would be now known as bullying, right?
In a big way, but it was part of the deal.
Yeah.
You knew that going in.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It was miserable, Neil. I mean, when I tell you I hated it so much, I would sit across the street in a parking lot just looking at the house going, I don't want to go. I don't want to go there. And it finally got to the point where, they would ask you, what's my name, hometown, and major? And I go, man, I don't care. I don't even like you anyway.
Yeah.
And that was kind of when we decided that probably wasn't the right place for me. But it made me feel a certain way.
Right.
It made me feel like I didn't belong, that I was worthless, that nobody liked me. And I knew that wasn't the truth, but that kind of got down in my soul. And so I started, I noticed that the cool guys seemed to be smoking a lot of pot. So guess what I started doing? smoking a little bit of dope here and there.
Cannabis.
Yeah, and I started dating a girl, and she was into heavy metal, and we're still friends to this day. But we dabbled, okay? We weren't hardcore users of anything, but it was back in the 80s, so ecstasy was a big deal. I think they call it something else today. I don't know what. But we did a little bit of that. We partied a lot. We drank a lot. We were big in the bar scene. And that was fine for a time, right? It still wasn't unmanageable because I was in school and making good grades and doing all that. But when I was a junior, everything changed. I was playing basketball one night when I should have been studying because I had a calculus test the next day. And calculus is the one thing I never got. Okay, I'm just going to tell you right here.
I'm the same way.
Honestly, don't understand it. But anyway, there's a guy, we used to call him Muscle Jesus. His name's Barry. He looked like Jesus, but he was big as a house. And he heard me talking about I had to study for this test. And he goes, hey, I got something that'll help you. I said, well, what is it? He goes, it's cocaine. I said, well, I've seen Miami Vice. Let's try it out. So we went back to his place, and we did a little tiny line of that. And let me just tell you, when I did that, my reaction was, what was that, and how do I get some more? And that started a 23-year journey of drugs and women and alcohol and all this stuff, whereas none of the other stuff had really done that. And I used to always tell people, well, I never thought I was an alcoholic, but guess what? Turns out alcohol makes everything else sound like a good idea to me. So no alcohol, no anything, but I got really, really, really bad. I was really sick, and I managed to keep a job. I managed to move up somehow, but it got to a point where it was completely unmanageable. And I had been married a couple times, and the second marriage was falling apart, and a lot of that had to do with the drugs and the alcohol. There was a lot of other issues too, but my daily diet, this is what happened, okay? My daily diet looked like this. I would get up in the morning, and I lived in a big house, 5-bedroom house. I have a lot of kids, and my office was way on the other side of the house, and that's where I kept my Lortabs, my pain pills, because I didn't want to ever overdose on those and take too many at night, so I just kept them away from the bedroom. But I would get up, I'd go take one of those first thing in the morning because I thought I needed it, right? I had back issues, had problems, thought I needed it. Had a doctor that would prescribe me 90 at a time. So I always had them. And then I would make some, so I was living by myself with my kids at the time, going through a divorce. And then I would make coffee. I don't smoke, but I did when I was using. And so I would go out and smoke a cigarette, make breakfast for the kids. If I had some cocaine, maybe do a line of cocaine to wake up, take my kids to school. And then coming out of the school, I would, remember when we had CD cases? I'd pull out a CD case, chop up a big old line of cocaine, and bang it right as I was leaving the school. I think that's a felony. I'm pretty sure. But my life, if I told my whole story, it's full of could have got in trouble. Right. Should have been in jail. Should have been in prison. But for whatever reason, God protected me in my life. And that did not happen.
Looking out for you for sure. We're continuing with Keith Perret, and Keith has quite a story to tell. He happens to be a business owner in the CSRA with State Farm. On Facebook, to follow him in the journey and the positive light, it's Keith SF Perret on Facebook and kpinthehouse.com. He'd be happy to sit down and share with you anything personally or work with you, of course, on anything you need to be protected with your family and business in terms of insurance. So that was sort of what was like. And what was like for you, and some of the things that happened, and then was there more?
Yeah. So here's kind of what really happened. So my daily diet was Lortabs. I'd go back to sleep after I dropped the kids off because I hadn't slept all night. Sleep till about 11. Get up, maybe do a line of cocaine, maybe take a Xanax to even it out a little bit. Do my work, and then I'd maybe take another Lortab at 2:00. I mean, I had it kind of planned out, right? And then I had to sober up a little bit because I had to go get my kids. And then I would go pick up the kids, go to their sporting events, whatever we had to do, come home, make dinner, make sure all that got done, and then start back up again in the evenings once they started going to bed.
Vicious cycle.
And at night, guess what? I couldn't figure out why I couldn't sleep. I wonder why, right? So I would take Benadryl and then drink shots of vodka. Now, that will kill you. that combination of drugs will absolutely kill you. And one night I was in my house, and the only two people in the house were myself and my daughter, who was 15 at the time. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was doing all of that, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't sleep. And I was like, well, I'll go take a shower. So I went in the shower, and as soon as I started the shower, the world started going black fast. And I remember thinking to myself, if I go down, I'm not getting back up. And so I grabbed hold of the spigot and turned it on cold and just held on. And because my temperature had spiked. So as it started coming down and the world started coming back into the view, I went and laid on the bed. Now, it's important to know that I told everybody I knew that I had a problem. I told my parents, I told my siblings, I told my pastor, I told all of them. And you know what they said to me, Neil? They said, oh, just stop doing that. Well, why would you do that? Just stop doing that.
Who was the president's wife? Was it Nancy Reagan?
Yeah.
Just say no.
Yeah, just say no. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
In fact, my best friend, Brian, we were in his man room. He's got a nice house with a really cool man cave. And we were in there one night, and I said, Brian, I got to talk to you. I said, I have a serious drug problem. I don't know what to do about it. And he looks at me and he goes, Keith, he goes, if you're a drug addict, you're the most put together, successful drug addict I've ever seen in my life. I said, well, that might be true, but I just did a line about that big off the back of your toilet. So what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so anyway, but I tried to get help, right? But so this night I called my brother, who's an internal and pulmonary specialist, and said, look, this just happened. He goes, I think he almost just stroked out. I said, yeah. I said, I need to go to rehab. And so that was the low point. That was what finally got me to go to rehab. Because the other thing, and a lot of people struggle with this who are like me, myself, who are successful in business in their work, is how am I going to leave everything I'm doing for 30 days and go to rehab? I had kids, I had a house, I had bills, I had a job, I had all these things. But it really just came to the choice was either go to rehab or die.
Now, when was this, where was this, and what was it like?
So this was back in 2012.
Okay.
In Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay.
And so what we did is we ended up finding a rehab in North Dallas called Karen. Awesome place. And I was excited to go, quite honestly, because I used to lay awake every night on a couch, and I would pray this prayer. And there's a train that goes through Baton Rouge, outside of Baton Rouge at 3 o'clock every morning. You know how I know that? Because I was up every night at 3 o'clock, and I heard that train going through. But I would pray this prayer. I'd say, God, show me what I need to do to beat this. Give me the strength that I need to beat this addiction. It turns out I was praying the wrong prayer because I couldn't do it. And I didn't understand that, and I didn't know that. But so when I went to rehab, I was extremely willing to do what else. I knew I didn't have the answer, so maybe these people knew something I didn't. So I get there, and there's a lot of things I could tell you about that, but the most important thing is this. About a week and a half into it, the spiritual advisor, his name's Steve, says, hey, come see me in my office. So we're sitting across the table just like this, and he looks at me and he says, you know what the problem is here, right? I said, no, man, if I knew what the problem was, I wouldn't be here. Why don't you enlighten me? And he looks right at me and he goes, you don't love yourself. And I said, no. I said, I love me some me, man. I'm good. He goes, no, you don't love yourself. I said, no, really. I said, I grew up in a good home, good parents, no abuse, none of that stuff. I said, I'm good. He said, you don't love yourself. Now, this went on for about 10 minutes. And finally, I was like, are you done goodwill hunting me here? Can I go? And I went and sat back in my room, and I was upset. But it turns out he was exactly right. I didn't like anything about me. I led this real double life where on one side of my life, I, would volunteer, help anybody I could, help start a church, worked as the youth director, played in the band, did all this stuff. And on the other side, I traveled. And when I was out traveling, it was a free-for-all, tracing strippers, snorting cocaine, drinking, you name it, we did it. And it was this double life that I just hated, and I hated myself for it. And so that started a journey of self-discovery that helped me to start getting better, right? And because here's the key to recovery is learning about yourself and understanding why you do things and understanding the deep-seated beliefs that we have in our subconscious that drive our behaviors. And some of those beliefs are false beliefs, but they were things that happened, or they were taught us, they were reinforced by something that happened and then taught to us again, and they come down here and they become a belief. And we work off of that. And so I get out of rehab. Now, here's an unexpected thing that happened. And this, if anybody's been to rehab that's listening to this, you know what I'm talking about. I get out of rehab and I'm thinking, Dad's back, everything is good. Everything was not good. Because my kids, and I have 5, were looking at me going, wait a minute. Now, you've told us our entire lives, if we're going to drink responsibly, don't use drugs, stay away from these people, and you've been doing all of this. You know, you're just a giant hypocrite.
So you had to try to rebuild relationships and trust.
And that's hard. And in fact, it was so hard and it was such a big mess with our family that we bugged out for a year. We literally sold our house and moved down to the coast, left the kids there. They were all 18 and in college, but went down to the coast and didn't speak to my family for an entire year. Everybody just needed some space. And it was actually a really good year for me and Raquel to go down and focus on us and focus on work and kind of get used to the whole sobriety thing. I had some cousins down there. It was in Pass Christian, Mississippi. Lovely, awesome place if you ever go there. But after about a year, though, it was time to start mending those fences and building those relationships again. And I got to be honest, it's been a process even to today to do that. But the best thing you can do, and I tell people this all the time, they want to go, because part of the 12 steps is making amends. Everybody's heard that. The best amends you can make to anybody is a living amends. How are you going to live your life today? Be that example of somebody that has turned it around and lives the right way and lives out these principles and lives out the things that we say we're going to do every day of your life. And so the point in all that is just because you get sober doesn't mean everything's rosy. I still had a house in foreclosure. I still had $60,000 in revolving credit card debt. I still had problems with my kids. I had all these things to deal with. And then on top of that, we get in a serious motorcycle wreck at the end of 2013 that puts me in the hospital for 2 months. And so we're looking at all this going, God, what are you doing? But as it turns out, all that stuff worked together for our benefit. And it brought us to the point we're at today, where if you look at my life 10 years ago and you look at it today, there's absolutely no resemblance between the two. If you look at me physically versus 10 years ago, it would blow your mind. Just the difference in my countenance, the way I look, the health, everything that we have. And but look, we've been through some serious things since then. We've been through cancer. We've been through moving a couple times. We've been through changing careers. We've been through starting up a business and then COVID and all the things that have gone on with that. But you know what? God is good. And he's blessed us. I say all the time, he's blessed us when we deserved it and blessed us when we didn't. And the biggest thing that changed for me, there's 2 big things. One is I finally got to go from being a believer to being a follower of Christ. And there's a big difference between those 2 things. But I could never do that while I was drinking and using and living in the flesh. But once I got that straightened up, all of a sudden it started to make sense to me. And the things that I didn't understand how I could do and enjoy them now made sense to me. And so our life today is really Christ-centered. It is centered around helping other people. I give a lot of my time every week to others. And I do that by choice.
And we'll talk about some of the organizations that Keith helps and you can be involved in as well. And again, Keith's Facebook page is Keith SF Perret, and it's KP in the house if you need any insurance information, of course. And of course, you're putting God at the center of your life. How did God lead you to Augusta?
That's a whole nother story. It's I can wrap it up kind of like this: is that when I turned 50, I had an attack of conscience, and I had a good job. It paid really well. I worked out of my house. I traveled, and I was doing this job sober at this point. But I started thinking about it, going, you know what? We've been so blessed with family and health and children and all these things. It was time for us to give some of that back. And so I took me a year to quit my job, but I did. And we started looking around going, where do you want us, God? And we were praying about this. And we looked at a couple of different opportunities. We actually looked at opening some rehab centers down on the coast. We had some investors, but it just wasn't the right time for that. And we looked at opening a gym. There was a lot of things, but State Farm really fit the bill for a lot of reasons. My mother had worked for State Farm for 28 years for agents, so I was very familiar with what they did. I always knew my agent. And so once we made the decision to do that, then it became, okay, where are we going to go? And I got to be honest with you, we looked at 10 different cities on our own dime, flew there, looked at places, and we were settled on Colorado Springs. And at the last minute, Augusta popped up. And I'll never forget it. I went upstairs. I worked downstairs. My wife worked upstairs in our house, and I walked up there. I said, hey, what do you think about Augusta, Georgia? And she goes, my wife's from the West Coast. She's from Seattle. She goes, I don't know anything about Augusta, Georgia. I said, well, Google it and tell me what you think. And so she comes down about 30 minutes later with a piece of paper, wagging it, going, we are not moving to Augusta, Georgia. I was like, well, why not? She goes, they call it Disgusta. I'm like, Disgusta? I was like, let me see those reviews. And so I looked at them. I was like, these are from people from like California. I said, they don't know the South. I said, something in my heart is telling me to call this guy. So I'm going to call him. And so I called our sales leader up here. I liked him very much. And my wife is a wonderful, wonderful woman, super supportive. So she's like, okay, if you think we need to go there, we'll go to one more place. But she did not have a good attitude when we came up here. But we flew in on a Friday, and we met John, and he toured us around the city. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous day, I think in late September. Mm-hmm. And, we looked at the economic opportunities here in Augusta with the Cyber Center and Fort Gordon and all the growth that's happening up in Grovetown and Evans and all that, and even the resurgence that we're seeing in downtown, mm-hmm. and liked what we saw. And, so then we got ready to go home on Sunday. We got on the plane, and she looks at me and she goes, I can't explain it, but I think this is where we're supposed to be. Mm. I said, I feel the same thing. And a process that probably should have taken 3 months took exactly 1 week. And so God put us here. And for the longest time, we're like, why have you brought us here? Why are we here? We know it's not just for State Farm. State Farm is a vehicle. It's a platform that we can use to be a part of the community. Because just like a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO of a big company, it gives you entree into a lot of different places. For example, I just got put on the board of directors with the Chamber of Commerce here in Richmond County.
Right.
I do a lot of work with Columbia County's Chamber, North Augusta's Chamber. We get involved with, there's a lot of events that happen in Grovetown that we're a part of, different festivals. And that's not just Grovetown, but other cities as well.
Harlem, Oliver Hardy Festival.
Yeah, and then one of my big passions, as you can see by the picture behind us, is cars.
Right.
And so I've kind of become the car agent. The one that sponsors the car shows and goes to Coffee and Cars and goes to the Bring It Back meets and all the stuff that happens out at the track. But he brought us here, and for the longest time, we were really wondering why. But we joined Victory Baptist Church, which is phenomenal. We love it.
I've met the pastor, and and he used to do revivals. It feels like you are going to a revival. And if I can find a video that I made years ago for a program that I did called Crosstalk, we'll insert it in here because he is anointed.
Let me tell you this, sin will put you in a place where there's a downward slope where you end up doing things you never thought you'd ever do.
Yes, sir.
I need a witness up in here. Don't you make me preach this by myself today. Sin will make you get to a place where you will do things and live in environments that you thought you'd never be and never do.
Yeah, CT's amazing.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was just with him last night, and we were talking about what we're doing to revamp our recovery program at Victory, which if anybody wants information about that, contact me, and I would love to tell you what we're doing in more detail. But yeah, that's why he brought me here. So it was to be involved in to meet people like Cliff Nobles over at 143 and
the River Church as well.
But there is a huge recovery community here, and there is a lot of people doing a lot of really good work here. And I don't know where all this goes. I don't know if my role is to eventually get into politics and help that way, or if it's to get involved more in ministry and help that way. I'm just trying to be obedient to what God has for us. I wake up every day, and somebody taught me this recently. They said, stop praying for God to tell you what to do, and start praying for God to speak into your spirit. Because if you'll do that, you're going to know what to do. If you listen to that still small voice and the nudge, you're going to know what you should be doing on a daily basis to further the kingdom and to be more Christ-like.
Well, if it's politics, I know you can help out what's going on with the ambulance service and all that, because you deal with that with accidents and all. And I mean, those are important issues in the community.
And being on the board at the chamber, we were just dealing with that issue and talking about that. And also I'm on the advocacy committee. We're actually going up to Atlanta, not next Monday, but the following Monday.
In February.
With the delegation. Are you coming to that? You should come.
No, I don't. I'm not planned to.
It'll be good.
Twist my arm. Maybe so.
I'm looking forward to it, but it's a full day. And but it's a good opportunity to get in front of the senators and the House of Representatives and the governor and really start understanding what it takes to make legislative changes, because it's difficult. And then you look at Augusta with our new mayor Garnett Johnson and what he's having to deal with the commissioners. It's difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, you have some people that have been in office for a long time that think one way, and you got some people that think another way, and there's a lot of gridlock there. And how we're going to get anything done in this city, I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see. The best we can do is stay involved as businesses and let our voices be heard by getting involved with some of these things.
Sure.
And a lot of people are afraid to get involved, just like a lot of people are afraid to share what I've been sharing with you here. I'm not. I'm an open book. If you want to judge me based on who I was, knock yourself out. If you don't want to do business with me because of what I did in my past, that's fine. Why don't you judge me based on who I am today and what I'm doing today? Because I'll tell you this, I thought I was in a good place spiritually a year ago. And I look back on it now and go, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? Because God is just working on me, and he's working on my spirit, and he's working on my wife, and he's working on our business. And we just try to bring that everywhere we go. We try to bring that spirit, that energy, and it shines through. It shows when you do that. And people will open up to you if you will open up to them. I mean, I can't tell you the things people tell me when I'm sitting there talking to them, because I'm willing to open up to them first.
That's right.
And but I got over that a long time ago, being worried about what people think. It really doesn't matter what people think. What matters is what does my Heavenly Father think about what I'm doing.
The audience of one, as it were. And as we kind of wrap up, anything else you'd like to add about what life is like now, and any other pearls of wisdom?
Well, I would just say that now, we are busier now than we have been in the last 20 years. My wife often looks at me and goes, why have you done this thing? We were chilling on the beach, and now,
what is tell me Monday to Sunday. Of course, he has a day job, as you can see.
Yeah.
He's writing policies. He's helping with accidents.
So, State Farm is more than a full-time job.
Right.
I mean, when you look at all the things you have to do to market your business and promote your business and be involved in the community, it's more than a full-time job. But like on Monday nights, for example, I've been teaching the recovery class over at Victory. Tuesdays, I generally have my evenings open so I can spend a little bit of time with my wife.
That's kind of you.
Yeah, it is good. And then on Wednesdays, I go over to 143. They do a discipleship class at 5:45, and then they have another meeting after that. So that usually, you're not out of there till 8:30 at night. Thursdays, I will sometimes go to an AA meeting. There's a great one under the bridge in North Augusta that we really, really like.
Roger, is that the
No. This is just
different one.
Just straight up AA.
Gotcha.
Meeting. And so sometimes I do that. Sometimes I'll also go home on Thursdays, because Friday nights we're at the river. They have church on Friday nights. Saturdays are usually packed out with either stuff for, events for work, or, sometimes we have a little bit of time to ourselves, because Sundays are busy.
Sun up to sundown.
Yeah, we do church in the morning, sometimes church in the evening, or sometimes AA speaker meeting in the evening, and then we're back to Monday. So, and I'm 56 years old, man, and I'm pushing it hard. Every now and then I just got to take a day and rest. And usually my wife's real good about noticing when I'm getting to that point that I'm just going to crash. And so I try to take care of myself physically. We try to eat well. We try to do all the things we need to do to be able to do this and function at this level.
That's fantastic. I'm just so excited because, we sit on a board together, TAB, the Alternative Board for Business Owners. I am just excited to know where you're heading. I didn't know about politics, but I could see that. I could see very heavy duty more in ministry and your business, and I think it's fantastic. And anyway, just appreciate your transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, with the politics thing, I don't know what that guy was. The reason I would do that is to get involved at the local level, because I think too often the people that end up in politics at the local level are just the people that will do it, and not people that are going, okay, I need to, maybe I don't want to say that. It's not, you really can't make that blanket thing, but I do see where there's opportunity to get involved and really change things for the positive, bringing the right attitude, the right experience, and making good decisions, not just for us, but for our kids and for the community as a whole. And so we just want to make a difference. I think when you wrap it all up, we just want to make a difference. I want to, when I'm gone, I want people to say that was a guy that cared about people. That was a guy that loved people. That was a guy that made a difference in his community and to the people that were around him.
It was a pleasure to know you and to get to know Keith a little more again on Facebook, Keith SF Perret, and then kpinthehouse.com is in the website, and appreciate it. This is I thank you for your patience. If you've watched through the entire podcast, this is a first for me. I feel like we had church today, so it's not even Sunday or Wednesday night. Thank you. Right. Thank you,
brother.
Okay.